Welcome back. Let's continue our discussion on algebraic fractions. In the first problem, if k plus 1 over k whole squared equals 16, then what is k squared plus 1 over k squared? This is a very, very simple problem. All you have to do is a plus b whole squared equals a squared plus b squared plus 2ab. That's what we know. So k plus 1 over k whole squared equals k squared plus 1 over k squared plus 2 times k times 1 over k equals k squared plus 1 over k squared plus 2. Now this whole thing is equal to 16. So k squared plus 1 over k squared equals 14. Okay. If 20 volt of current is applied, 4 amp of current is produced. How much current will be produced when 5 volt is applied? We know for sure that it has to be less than 4. So it can be B, it cannot be C, it cannot be D, because our voltage is reduced. So if 20 volt can produce 4 amp of current, then 5 volt would produce 5 volt times 4 amp over 20 volt. So that'll be 1 amp of current. So the correct answer is A. Okay. A fort had provisions for 300 men for 90 days. After 20 days, 50 men have left the fort. How long would the food last at the same rate? Now, if any of you have taken any chemistry class, whatever be the capacity will be, you may have come across something like this. Again, it may not look exactly like this, but somewhere along these lines. Okay. What is this M1 times D1 equals M2 times D2? We're assuming there is some sort of a linear relationship between the men and the number of days. And so M corresponds to number of men, and D corresponds to number of days. Okay. At the start, we have 300 men. Okay. After 20 days, okay, we have now 50 men short. That means we have now 250 men, right? But at the same time, we've started with 90 days, and after 20 days, that means our new D is 70 days. And we're asked to determine how long would the food last. That means we don't know D2. So D2 would be 300 times 70 over 250 is 84. So the food would last 84 days. I don't think you can solve this problem any faster than this method. Okay, this sort of formula can be extended to more than 2 variables. That is, you can have 3 variables equated to 3 variables. We'll see some more problems on that concept. So we have 6 sheep or 8 bulls that can graze a field in 28 days. How long would 9 sheep and 2 bulls take to graze the same field? The key here is this equation, or this equating values. We can see 6 sheep equals 8 bulls. They both take 28 days. Okay. So in other words, if you were to convert sheep into bulls or bulls into sheep in terms of ratio, then it makes a problem simple. In other words, 1 sheep would be same as 8 over 6 bulls. Okay, to take 28 days to graze the field. Okay, that means 9 sheep plus 2 bulls, what would it take? That's what we are ultimately asked to figure out. So we know 1 sheep is equal to 8 over 6 bulls. So 9 sheep would be 9 over, I guess you can assume it to be 1 times 8 over 6 bulls, right? So that will be, what is it? 2 times 3 times 2, 3 times 3, 4. So it'll be 12 bulls. 1 sheep is equivalent to 8 over 6 bulls. 9 sheep is equal to 12 bulls. So now let's add these two. So that means 9 sheep plus 2 bull is same as 2 bulls plus 2 bulls. 12 bulls plus 2 bulls, which is 14 bulls total. Okay. We know 8 bulls can graze a field in 28 days. Okay. One day, how long would it take for one bull to graze the field? Would be 28 times 8 days, right? Right? So if you divide that by the total number of bulls, then you get, I believe it's 16 days. So essentially what we have done is we had an algebraic expression in terms of sheep plus bulls. And it would be difficult to solve the problem because the second part of the question doesn't give much to actually solve the problem. The only way we would be able to solve the problem is to take information from the first fragment of the question where we are equating the amount of sheep to the bulls, convert the sheep to bulls or bulls to sheep, whichever one you prefer, and then change the algebraic expression that is 2 variable into a single variable, either all in terms of bulls or all in terms of sheep, and then we use the information to get the total number of days it would take for the sheep and bulls to graze the field, right? So this is rather a moderately complex problem because it is unlike the problem we did before where we could use some sort of a logical expression where we can plug in values to arrive at the final answer. Here you have to twist and turn the problem a little bit to be able to solve the problem, right? A regiment of 500 men had provisions for 21 days. However, a reinforcement of 300 men arrived. The food would now last for, again, just like we did previously. Let's say M corresponds to the number of men and D corresponds to the number of days. So that means M1 times D1 equals M2 times D2. We know that at the start we had 500 men and then we had 24 days. And then 300 more men arrived, so the total men now is 800. What would be D2? That is, how long would the food now last, which means 500 times 24 over 800. So it's essentially 24 times 5 over 8. That's 15. Yes, I must have made a calculation mistake when I entered the choices. So it will be 500 times 24 divided by 800. It's 15. So I guess we can change the 16 to a 15. So it'll take 15 days before the food would be out. So the correct answer is B. Okay. As I mentioned previously, that you do not have to restrict yourself to just 2 variables on each side. You can actually have 3 variables. Here we have 12 men working 8 hours a day, complete a piece of work in 10 days. To complete the same work in 8 days, working 15 hours a day, the number of men required would be, let's assume M as number of men. You would see just how simple this problem is, you know. Had I had this sort of logic when I was learning these concepts back in the days, I would have finished my test faster. In fact, I may have even got a better score. So M corresponds to number of 1. Let's call H being number of hours and D being number of days. Okay, since we have 2 sets, let's call M1 times H1 times D1 equals M2 times D2 times H2. Okay, M1 is 12 men working 8 hours a day, complete the work in 10 days. Second, we have to need to complete the same work in, we don't know the number of men, so let's call it X, 8 days and 15 hours, right? So X equals 12 times 8 times 10 over 8 times 15. That's 8 men. So the correct answer is B. Again, 39% can repair a road in 12 days, working 5 hours a day. In how many days will 30% working 6 hours a day complete the work? So let's denote persons for P, hours for H, and D for days. Okay, that means P1 times H1 times D1 equals P2 times H2 times D2. P1 is 39%, 5 hours a day, working for 12 days. In how many days? So we know person, so it's 30% times 6 hours, and we don't know days. So it'll be 39 times 5 times 12 over 30 times 6. This is 2, this is 15, this is 3, and so it'll be 13 days. Okay. And this is the last problem in this video. Determine if the following tables represents direct, indirect variation, or neither. Okay, so one way to do it would be assuming y equals nx or y equals n over x. Okay, this is some constant. Okay, so if x is 1 and y equals 2, okay, n is 2 over 1 equals 2, right? Right. So essentially, you can now take y equals 2 over x. So now let's substitute y equals 2 over 4, which is, y equals 2. If you change x to be 2, y is 1, right? Well, y becomes 1, but y should be 4, right? So we can have an indirect, this is indirect variation, and this is a direct variation, right? If we had applied x equals 2, then we should have got 4. We used this y equals nx format, right? Right? Which proved that this is not indirect, but it's direct. So if you had taken y equals, if you have to get 2 times 2, that's 4. So this is the equation for direct, so that will be a direct variation. Similarly, y equals n over x or nx, it doesn't matter. When you're trying to determine the value of n, it didn't matter how you write it. So y equals 2, n times 1, n equals, again, 2. So you can apply it in the indirect variation method. So pick any value of your choice for x. So we know n is 2, x is 2, or I guess x is 5, if that makes any sense. Sure, that's not getting 15, right? Right? If you had substitute n as 2 and you substitute y as 5, right? Right? That means we should have got 15, right? But we didn't. You got what, 1 over 2 over 5. That's not, definitely not 15, right? What if you had substituted y equals 2 times 15, or 2 times 5? That would be 10, right? Either way, we're not getting a direct or indirect relationship, right? So it's neither. Remember, in this case, you could pick any x value. We were able to reproduce the y value. Say I had picked 5. Okay, I got my y value back. Whereas here, whether I applied it in the direct variation or indirect variation, I am not getting my y value back, right? So that means it is neither. So this one is direct, this one's neither. All right, so stay tuned for more videos, and if you've learned something, consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you with another video on the topic of algebraic fractions.